Welcome to Positive Philter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, Positive Philter listeners, people of the world. It's me, Philip Wilkerson. I'm back with another episode of Positive Philter. I'm joined by a special guest. Everyone's a special guest because they took time to join me on the show. I'm joined with Dr. Nolan Cabrera. Now, I met him while he did a presentation on one of his books. I can't remember the title. He's going to tell me. But he did a great presentation to me at George Mason University about the work he's doing. And I wanted to have him on the podcast because, as someone that's a higher ed professional, we see a lot what's going on in the changing landscape of higher ed. He's an expert in this. And we're just going to talk about the evolution of higher ed, what's going on, how we can be practitioners of social justice within our units, within our campus communities, use our voices and all the like. But before we get started, Dr. Cabrera, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and your background?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on your podcast. I appreciate it. And also with, the little blip that we had. So I'm glad we could reschedule and all this good stuff. So appreciate you on that. My name is Nolan Cabrera. I'm a he, him, his pronouns. And I am a full professor at the University of Arizona. There, I'm in the Center for the Study of Higher Education, where I look at the racial dynamics of college campuses, specifically with a focus on whiteness. And then I've also been deeply involved in the controversy regarding when Arizona banned Mexican American studies in the early 2010s. So before they banned critical race theory, they banned Mexican American studies and created the blueprint for said banning. And then the book that you were referring to that I was presenting at George Mason was my one out of Teachers College Press called The Whiteness in the Ivory Tower, or Why Don't We Notice All the White Kids Sitting Together in the Quad?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think I took a while ago when I'm trying to be a good doctor like you. I started off in the higher ed program, COVID hit, life happened, and then I switched to the communications program. But very positively, while I had the one class that I had in the higher ed doctoral program was around race and identity in higher ed. And it was a great class. And one of the things I thought about initially was that the model of higher education is not the same model. We learned, I think one of the courses is about, you have to learn a little bit about historical context about these systems that we're in. And so, let's just talk about that. Like when we think about college back in the day, when you look at all the colleges that started, the first oldest institutions, the William and Mary's and all that, they were only like a select few that went to those universities.
Exactly.
Mainly white plantation owners of wealth. That model is not the same. And so let's talk about that. What are some of your thoughts on that, about that model?
Sure. So it's really, really clear that the most privileged social identities, white, wealthy, landowner, cis male, all those ones are that was who higher education was initially created for. I mean, it's in the title, higher education. Like it's meant
higher.
Yeah, exactly. As opposed to, mass education in K-12, right? And it was meant necessarily for, for the elites of society. I mean, if we go into the history, and there's a fascinating book called The Chosen by Jerome Carabel, where he does the history of Yale, Princeton, and Harvard. And it is fascinating and disturbing because we always think about, we're so embedded in this notion of meritocracy, where my talents will push me into the place that best fits. Most aligns with if I'm a high talent, I'm going to go to Harvard. If I'm mid talent, I'm going to go to, I don't know, University of Arizona. And if I'm low talent, I'm going to go to community college. Like that's kind of, that's the mental model.
It's funny. It's funny that you use that because I think that is the model that we've already been ingrained. I remember that, but that's not the model no more. But we'll go into that.
Well, but not only that, and here's what makes me so mad when you hear, say, like Pete Hegseth, the head of Department of Defense, or the head of the Secretary of Defense, keeps talking about, we don't hire on DEI, we only hire on merit, like we've always done in the society. Well, what's beautiful about the way that Karabel did his analysis was he showed we've never actually been in a meritocratic society when you look at the most elite universities in our. So, like, for example, because these are supposed to be, gentlemen, and I use that term specifically, gentlemen of prestige and of culture. You're not supposed to try so hard. It was more about the social connections that you could get. So in the
Yes.
Ivy Leagues, when they were first created, there was this thing called the gentleman's C, right? So I'm not too much of a brainiac. Don't make it think, I'm sitting here, I'm good, and really it falls into that business model of it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yes.
And at the same time, they were always intent on cultivating the next leaders of tomorrow. It's so ridiculous that Yale, up until I believe it was the 1950s, would report the incoming height of its freshman class, wanting it to average at 6 feet tall, because as we all know, again, air quotes, that tall men are our best leaders.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, I
exactly.
thought that was great. No, because I thought about that. I was joking, and it's weird about leadership and identities. That I mean, there's a study that shows that people that are quote unquote more attractive are viewed as more credible. And
Exactly.
I was
Yep.
there was a question. I had this book, and it was like, if you could be born and you had to be born overtly ugly, dumb, stupid, or something else. I got a book. It's called Book of Questions, where you ask it and think about it.
Hmm.
I was like, I don't know. For me, I don't care if I'm ugly. I want my brain to be sharp. But like
Exactly.
some people be like, I would pick very attractive because then people still connect with me, give me
Hmm.
the answers. You know what I'm saying? So
Of course.
going back to that, that's crazy that
Yep.
Harvard actually understood that, or not Harvard, university, understanding
Yeah.
that they were
Yeah.
looking at aesthetics to
Hmm.
measure competency.
Absolutely. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because we're the elites of society, we produce all of the leaders. All of the leaders are out there in society. They look a certain way. Then it
Yeah.
just keeps cycling through. Now, there was a major shift in the mid 19th century, where there was the Moral Land Grant Act.
Yep.
And so this is one, and it's really fickle. And I'm going to try to thread a really fine needle here because I'm going to be talking about two contradictory issues at the same time. So the first one is that as well, I was going to say westward expansion, but that's too benign a term. I mean, it was the forcible theft of indigenous lands, violent theft going to the west. Um, there were localized needs, especially in like agricultural education,
Yes.
and so you had these lands that were dedicated by the U.S. government to have more mass higher education
Yeah.
and allow for more access. And so you didn't just have to be, the blue bloods of Connecticut or New
Yep.
York City. You could, be the sons and daughters of farmers, and it did open up a little bit more space. There were a couple of difficult things about that, though, because when this was going on, remember that segregation was still formally legalized, so it didn't open up access for everybody. But that's also when you had the increase of historically black colleges and universities,
Yes. Right.
because they basically, it was that whole idea that you wanted that as long as we had separate but equal, which we know is a fallacy, but separate but equal facilities, that it was okay to have formalized segregation in that way. And then you also
Yep.
saw the rise of women's colleges
For
in the same
teaching,
way.
and I guess with industries it was
Mhm.
mainly the women's colleges when they started was really ingrained in teaching and in nursing, but
Yeah, and
nursing was
home
really
economics.
and
Yep.
home and actors, but nursing was really coming out of like
Mhm.
the Civil War when they
Yep.
had women as nurses taking care. So
Yeah.
then they had
Yeah.
these like, okay, we had these needs, societal needs. We'll
Yep.
give you space here. We got
Hmm.
societal needs for teachers, but you can only go to a teacher's college, like only, but
Exactly. You're not going
most
to go to
likely
Harvard.
you're
Yep.
not going to go to Harvard. You're going to go to a teacher's college. We need the
Exactly.
societal need for women. We want women. We won't let you vote.
Yep.
You won't
Yeah.
let you vote, but then you can go to a nursing school or
Yep.
a teaching college, which a lot of universities started as teaching colleges, like James Madison, and their women's colleges before they morphed. And then I think the shift happened again, right, when veterans come back from war, opening
Exactly.
up the GI Bill, and then we started expanding into
Yeah.
the not blue collar, white collar workspace. But now we're at a point, a pivotal point in higher ed, where now we flaunt it as it's more of the opposite business model, that uh, more is better, right? Access is better. And so I pride ourselves, like I'm
Mm-hmm.
very proud that I'm at George Mason about
Mm-hmm.
being a very accessible school. We're in the
Yep.
community, non-traditional learners, but then it's still always a conflict of being accessible to all, but then the old age
Mm-hmm.
systems. Like
Of course.
we're accessible to all, but we still, it's mainly if you're rich, you got, you can afford to go to college, right? That's the
Uh-huh.
model, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
or we're accessible for all, but when you see faces, most of the faces are going to be white, cisgender,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
this identity. I don't know about the height. So I think we're at a pivotal point in this turn of the century of understanding the landscape of higher ed is changing, the model
Mm-hmm.
of learning is changing,
Mm-hmm.
the need to go to college is changing, for tech and engineering and different industries, not just nursing now, it's expanding,
Yep.
but there's still a strong conflict of the old way is still embedded into current higher ed. What's your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
So going back to what I said initially, that this myth, and I can't stress myth enough, of meritocracy still guides us a lot. And unfortunately, what happens is I think you're completely correct that, when you had the GI Bill and then you had, the expansion you had the concurrent expansion of higher education throughout. You also had a lot more community colleges, different areas like that. So,
Mhm.
you had formalization like the master plan in the state of California, where they were very clear. This is where we're going to have three tiers in the system. Um, that it was important because it was allowing for mass access to higher education, and with that came this idea that wait, we've you know we're supposed to say that this is based upon merit, but unfortunately, you've got just you've got some of the most ridiculous entitled people trying to still stake claim to higher education. One of the greatest examples of that was Abigail Fisher, who was the one who filed a lawsuit against UT Austin in the early 2010s because she was rejected as a legacy, as a white legacy from UT Austin. And she said it was because of their affirmative action program that I couldn't go to my dream school. I had to quote unquote settle for LSU. Um, and the weird part is she didn't, if you look at her record closely, she didn't have the grades or the SAT scores to be competitive. Like she wasn't like off the charts good, but she still was able to have her case heard twice before the Supreme Court about why affirmative action was harmful to white people. So what happens is when you have massification, you have new people coming in who higher education was not meant to serve. And we're having to adapt to these changing needs. But then there's the old vanguard, and we're seeing this pushback, or what I call a white lash, coming back that's saying, no, no, no. What you're really doing when you're talking about DEI is you're really discriminating against white people. And that's been sort of an undercurrent for the last 20, 30 years. But it just really, like right now, what's both troubling but also kind of interesting about the current administration is they're saying the quiet part out loud. This has always been kind of this discourse of reverse racism against white people, and it's large. It's a fallacy. It's a myth. It doesn't. But the more and more and more that you show that you get people to buy into it, the more and more toxic that it can be. And so I think that's what's happening. Is really what you've seen is we're nowhere near at the equity where we need to be, but we have a big enough critical mass that it becomes threatening. And I kind of draw a corollary between higher education and the housing market because it's pretty clear. And the statistic, I wish I had the book in front of me, but if I remember correctly, it's like once the black population of a neighborhood reaches, it's somewhere between like 6 and 9%. Um, but again, verify the exact
Mhm.
number. um, that's when you see white flight out of an area, right? And you see a similar thing in higher education where it's like oh my God, we're getting, our university is getting taken over by unqualified Black people, which is always those two terms always go together: the unqualified and insert the minority group, right? You only got in on because of affirmative action. You only got in because of this, et cetera, et cetera. The sad part is what people don't understand historically is we weren't seen as qualified even before affirmative action was in place. W.E.B. Du Bois, the probably premier sociologist of the
Oh, it's
20th
my man.
century.
Oh, yeah, it's my man. Yeah.
Oh, here
No,
we
you
go. Here
can't.
we
You can't.
go.
You're already. I'm fanboying, but like I said, like yeah, definitely
Yeah,
first Black Harvard grad.
that's
I
right.
I
That's
love
what.
his thing. He said, the pleasure's all yours. When he
Yeah,
when
no,
he
no,
said that.
the honor, I assure you, it was
Yeah,
all Harvard's.
yeah. I was like,
Exactly. That's a
yeah,
mic
yeah,
drop moment. But what
yeah.
happened was, if you there's a public document of where he was rejected by, oh God, what was the university? He had everything in place lined up to go to pursue his doctoral studies, and the response that he got for his first application, and again, I can't remember what the university was. It literally said, that while Mr. Du Bois is a tribute to his race, we're not really sure if he has the intellectual fortitude to really cut it in our area because of, basically being Black in that time period. And so again, it's one of these things that we never really had a meritocracy. We cloak it as that because again, it preserves this legacy and this mythology. And it goes back to what James Baldwin said, where he said that Americans have a unique capability of alchemizing bitter truths and transforming them into just these fairy tales. And that's really what we're dealing with right now. And that's why the current moment is so difficult, is that people have read the fairy tale so many times and heard the fairy tale so many times that they want to hold on to it as a reality. And we're just not talking about we're just not talking about reality. We're not talking about anything that's real and tangible and meaningful. I mean, the classic example right now, is the current administration's takeover of Washington D.C. and the guys that's this crime-ridden city. The facts don't matter in that case. Violent crime has been going down, all these things. But when you have a Black city and there's the unconscious association with Black and criminality, you don't really have to have the facts. You can just create these mythologies and people believe them.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the hardest parts to swallow about that is that you know I was always taught the opposite of that metric of mediocrity. Like it's like the opposite. Like if you really think about the hard work to get into those predominantly white
Mm-hmm.
spaces, I was like quite the opposite of mediocre. Like just to get in that space, I gotta be like, I gotta work 10 times as hard. And
that yeah.
there's a toll to that and there's a burden to that. And so like for
Mm-hmm.
those, the few that actually get into those spaces and they say, oh, based off affirmative action. I mean, if you really look at like, their pedigree or their resume or their work ethic, it's like
Mm-hmm.
a very different narrative, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like it's probably even more resounding, like if they were resilient from they came from a school that didn't have the same resources and still got good grades. That's like just
Exactly.
they're doing academics on all Madden mode. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Absolutely.
like just to get in, and then
Of
they're gonna be
course.
like, I don't know. And so
Hmm.
I don't know. I always thought like narratives was always a good way to change that, but it
Yes.
doesn't seem like it doesn't necessarily always work. And what I mean by that is like, when you get these examples of someone and say, oh, you're just here because you're Black. And then you're like, let me stun on them real quick and show you my Black excellence and my degrees
Mm-hmm.
and show all these like positive Black images. Then it's more so like you're cocky, arrogant, and you don't know your place. And so you're like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's the narrative though. I have to be overtly
Mm-hmm.
show you my worth all
Exactly.
the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think we saw that we had the term. Why do we need to have the term Black excellence? Well, I think because overtly we have to continuously prove that we're not mediocre.
Yep.
And so I don't know. I just think, what do you think about like that part about narrative sharing? Is like
Mm-hmm.
we had to share these narratives of excellence within the minority communities to
Mm-hmm.
to combat the narrative of you just got here because of this. But then at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, it doesn't always get I don't think it gets
Yeah,
received. That narrative doesn't get
yeah,
received
of course.
as the appropriate mechanism, if that makes sense. You know,
Of course, of course. And
like
so yeah, no, I
yeah.
totally hear you all the way around. And so I'm gonna because I definitely do think there's a lot of power in narrative, but I also remember very clearly that uh, you know, a mentor of mine, it was a joint mentor. She was actually talking to someone else in our group, um, because one of the people in our group was having her personal narrative, which should be this beautiful success story, weaponized against her. And she just told us straight up, no one is entitled to your life story. They have to earn it. And so I think that if you have to really be clear about what the intentionality is behind what the people are saying. So, like, oh, and also, by the way, there's one last part to it. Once you do, if they actually do believe, oh my gosh, this guy actually does have the academic chops, right? He's not just some angry Chicano, some angry black dude, so, unqualified affirmative action person. If you do stun on that, then the next step is, well, but you're the exception, not the rule. There's all these
Mm,
ways of dancing around it like that. You see what I'm saying? But for me, there's a key difference in the narratives, like when we're offering these up and who being very cognizant of who the audience is. So, like, for example, I was at a meeting of the college board about maybe 10, 12 years ago, and this guy, what he wanted to do, right? So he had there's a whole panel of scholars of color. Like, we all had our PhDs. We were, some folks were doing, more policy work. Some of us were in academia, but we were all like, all this stuff. And he came up, and we were talking about the inequities and how they're shaped and everything like that. And he comes up like, well, I have in my life, I have been called a racist and a homophobe and a sexist. And what I would like to know from you people is how you got to where you are. Like, how did you get to, because you talk about all these inequities, but yet you have all these scholars of color here who are wildly successful. Wouldn't it seem that you shouldn't even be here? And for me, like, the temptation, I was sad that one of my panelists took the bait, my co-panelists took the bait. That guy, whatever you say, is going to weaponize it. He's going to turn it in and say, like, well, so, like, the one person who spoke talked about how strong her family was and how they coalesced around her as a black woman and really helped her rise up. Well, how do you think he's going to take that? So therefore, the failures of black people are the failures of the black family. Again, the same trope, that same racist trope that, oh yeah, black families don't have black fathers. They're in poverty. That, they're the welfare queens. Think about every racist stereotype. No matter what she says, it always gets filtered right back through his preconceived notion. And so for me,
yeah.
I just told him straight up, you know, there isn't a rhyme or reason to it. You're not going to be able to. I don't really feel like you're entitled to my story. Although I did say, but if you don't want to be called a racist anymore, don't refer to people of color as you people in a public forum, which he didn't appreciate. But
Yeah, and I thought about that too. Like, you know, maybe it's as a scholar and someone learning about the power of narrative and research and numbers,
yeah,
I I think it could be very disheartening to like show evidence, concrete, we say evidence, obviously
yeah,
seeking truth, and it
hmm
just falls on deaf ears. But I don't think it should stop presenting. You should stop presenting evidence.
oh
And
no,
you
no,
get what you
no,
get what I'm
no.
saying? Like
Yeah,
I
of
think we
course, of course.
like the black fathers trope. Well, you
Yep.
know that there was an actual study that shows that black males are more involved fathers than other identity groups. Well, also Hispanic males too, about more hands-on and all that stuff. And
Yep.
like
Yep.
I
Yep.
thought about that and I was like, yo, that's true. And then
Yep.
we all these groups like Black Dads Matter and Black
hmm
Dads, and we
Exactly.
share these Instagram pictures, show me pictures of you and your kids, and we're trying to dispel
Of
that
course.
narrative.
Of course.
And then they're still gonna have those tropes, like black dads don't take care of their
Yep.
kids. But I feel
Yep.
like we should still just keep on feeding it. You're like, I don't know,
Always,
it's
always.
never gonna
No,
stop.
absolutely. And what's frustrating is it takes a lot of mental and emotional time to put those narratives out there. And when you see people who willfully just dance around it and are just willfully ignorant, um, it gets really frustrating because their ignorance does our communities harm in the process. It's not just like like if I'm sitting here saying like, you know, I am ignorant of the nature of organic chemistry, something like that, right? That doesn't have any impact on you, on on people in my family. It's just, I have a knowledge gap. That's fine. But when it's a willful ignorance about racial issues and this constant racial dance, what ends up happening is it solidifies these ideologies and that say that again, that you know, Black and Latino men are not good fathers.
Mhm.
We're uninvolved, all these different things, and it's frustrating because you would hope, like you allegedly see me as a person, right? You see me in this space, and yet you're sitting here telling me things. You're literally telling me what my reality is. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? And the audacity, or actually I call it the caucasity of a situation like that, to say, no, 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 no. Hey, Phil, I know you better than you know yourself. That's ridiculous. Because again, it's like they're trying to make sense out of things that they don't really have a background in, and that's one of the most frustrating things about racial issues is that everybody has an opinion on them, and usually the ones who are the loudest are the ones that are the least informed. Like it's a strange sort of inverted dynamic. I also think that because I watch Fox News all the time, and it's just like,
Yeah.
because I like having high blood pressure, but um,
Yeah. You're doing that to yourself, and I get it. Like sometimes
I
I
get it.
watch it just I had to watch both, but then I had to like feed my brain something else because it's hard to swallow that so much.
I
It's
understand that.
it's like you're doing it, but you're doing it on purpose because I'm a proponent of read both sides and read
Of
it even
course,
if it makes you
absolutely.
just read it even if it makes you angry.
Yep.
You at least got to
Yep.
read both sides. Like this is crazy, but you got to read it and
Mhm.
watch it and listen to it. Now
Of
going back
course.
to the centralized part, we're in a weird time about this model
Yes.
about the old way that universities work based on evidence of why you know access matters, entering the workplace with diverse workforce and having as many people go to higher ed to go into the workforce. We have all this evidence. We have institutions that are praised for their uh social mobility, getting ranked
Yes.
the university
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
elevates social mobility. So we have all this evidence. How do you foresee it just bouncing back? Like we're just going through a weird wave. This ain't forever. Like, what are your thoughts on
Hmm.
this this newest that we're having right now in
Of
regards
course.
to the attack on programs and DEI at universities? Do you think it's going to just? I tell people we're going to wait it out. It's going to go back and
Mhm.
forth, right? Like
It absolutely will.
action happened, then they try to take it back. It's going to come
Yeah.
back in a different. Like, how do you
Mhm.
how do you foresee this playing out?
You got it. So I think that one of the things that I do appreciate, and this almost hurts me to say, but I'm going to say something nice about Arizona State. But don't hold that over my head too much because as a proud Wildcat, that's a tough one. But if you look at U.S. News and World Report, your Harvard, Stanford's, Yale, MIT's, like they all pride themselves, and one of the core metrics is your selectivity rate. And so, I mean, right now, these universities are only admitting about maybe 4.9 to 5.3% of the people who apply. So you already have this elite applicant pool, and then you're taking, 1 in 20 of the quote unquote best of the best, and we can, unpack what that means. But one thing that I do appreciate about Arizona State, and there's not a lot, but one thing I really do is that their president Michael Crow consistently says, "I want Arizona State to be known by who it lets in, not by who it kicks out." And I think that in and of itself is the wave of the future because, like you said, we are increasingly a knowledge-based economy. Now, there's all sorts of shifts. There's all this debate. Well, is AI going to make all these knowledge-based things irrelevant? And
Yeah,
basically, with AI coders are out of a job. That's a very specific argument, but fundamentally, we're in a knowledge-based economy. That's not really something that's under debate. And so, I think what's going to end up happening in the long run is if these massive attacks on higher education really start to get felt, the corporate overlords, and I don't like this because it should just be like we can have our uh, uh, like we can have our DEI work just because it's like the right thing to do.
Oh, you're talking
Um,
about when it hits the pockets. That's when it's going to be like,
when
oh
it when,
God.
when it hits the Fortune 500 companies and they can't, and because either one of two things is going to happen, right? If we have an uneducated workforce, right, then either A, we're going to go overseas to get people, or B, we have to change the, where it would change these attacks on higher education. And I don't think it's an either or. I think it's probably going to be a both and.
Yes.
But once the Fortune 500 CEOs start seeing their bottom lines decrease as a result of these ridiculous attacks,
Yeah. The money. When it hits the
yeah,
money.
of course. But that's also why probably some of the most forceful amicus briefs in affirmative action cases were actually by Fortune 500 CEOs and saying that no, diversity is actually central to our bottom line. And you also saw that happen in the military. And so you had like basically all the major areas said diversity is actually really, really central to it. And that was really weird too, because if you read that affirmative action ruling really, really closely, you're not allowed to consider race unless it's a military academy. When it comes to military, they can do what they want to. But when it's, just your usual higher education, then that's when it's disallowed. I mean, the way that the Supreme Court is just twisting itself to do Trump's bidding right now is just ridiculous. But I think the other point is that
Yeah. So,
we
so, so
yeah,
you're
go ahead.
optimistic that it's gonna like. I
Oh
mean,
no,
it's good.
no, not at all.
You're not optimistic that. I mean, I'm optimistic as in, yeah, let it hit your pockets, and then they're gonna like. I think that's gonna. I'm like a optimistic cynicism. I mean, like no, like because
I
I'm
get you.
my mother. Some people be like, oh my God, the world is on. The world's on fire. Blah blah blah. It's really bad, and I agree. Right? I'm like, I'm not a realist. Like, oh, the world's not
Yeah.
on fire, but I just believe in like balance of like it's gonna be really bad and then it's just gonna keep going back and forth, like the cycle of history. So for me,
Mhm.
I agree that these negative consequences is gonna hit the pockets and then it's gonna come back. What do
Mhm.
like I'm saying? Like that's
Yeah.
the
So
positive part, like the optimism.
of course, of course. So I try to avoid, and I get a little bit of inspiration from Cornell West on this, that I try to avoid optimism, pessimism as a paradigm, because
Okay.
uh, at the at the end of the day, it's almost kind of a voyeuristic viewpoint. Like I see the available evidence, I think things will get better, are going to get worse, right? And the one area where I take a little bit of umbrance with Dr. King, because it's one of his most quoted sayings, was when he said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it always bends towards justice. I actually disagree with that for this reason: that like justice is a human construction. Like justice doesn't mean anything to like the tree outside of my window right now. It's we create it, and so it's uh what that means is that justice and that arc of the moral universe, it bends when we bend it. And that's what's been frustrating for me right now is I see a lot of social justice oriented people just saying like, look, I'm tired, I'm going to sit this one out.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like we don't have if we sit this one out, there's not going to be a place to come back to. But my point being this, that what I love the way that Cornell West breaks it down is he distinguishes very clearly between hope and optimism. So
Sure.
hope reigns eternal. Hope is the possibility that things can always get better. Whereas optimism is like, I think that, I'm a glass half full kind of guy, right? And hope
Okay.
is like, no, I have the ability to fill up that glass if I so choose, right? And so then that all from a hopeful perspective, what he calls being a prisoner of hope is foundationally important here, not in some hokey way, but it requires us to look deeply at social problems, get close to them, and say, our ancestors went through worse so we could be here. And so I have a moral and historical and cultural and community or responsibility to find the cracks in the walls of whiteness, to go deeply into these social problems, to really try to explore on a deep, deep level what is going on here, and really try to collectively strategize how we can bend the arc of the moral universe. And because the way that Dr. King said it, it's almost like this passive observer. Okay, things are, it's like, ooh, child, things are going to get better, things are getting easier. But this is saying, no, we're going to do it. We have to do it. And I prefer the hope orientation because it requires
I like that.
critical social analysis and collective
Action and agency.
risky action and agency that actually does
Yeah.
something with it.
Oh, I like that. I like that agency part. Right? I always said if there's not a space for you, create your own. I love those mindset. There's not a seat for you at the table, bring your own chair. Kind of, I love
Yeah,
that mindset of agency.
exactly.
And I think about that like in my own lane. What can I do? I think that in a world of
Hmm.
chaos, like I can't control everything. I can't understand that, but like I still have
Hmm.
agency in regards to my own intellect, agency into like my own writing and what you're
Yes.
doing. So everyone
Hmm.
has little pockets of agency. And so like
Exactly.
say something, see something, say something, all these things.
Yep. Exactly.
So with that, I'm gonna start saying that I'm more hopeful that this will get better
I like
rather
that.
than I'm
There we go.
optimistic. And I like that. So we're at a part of the show called Shot for Shot, where I get to ask you any random question. You get to ask me any random question. I do this stand up every episode. What question? You want to go first? I go first.
You go first. You lead me in, and then I'll piggyback.
Okay, so I definitely shout out to my son. We randomly got this book called like just questions. I'm gonna put it in the show notes. I'm not even sponsored by them, but they're funny. And this is the one I asked. They're not funny. They're actually like seriously deep and funny. Some of them, like the
Love
one
it.
I told you earlier about
Hmm.
ugly. But this one also spoke to me. And that's hold on, God, let me get it. It was okay. If you could live for 1,000 years. No, actually, I don't like that one. I like this one. This one better. No, I got this one. If
Okay.
you knew if the exact day, time, whatever of your death, your passing
Passing
was
on. Yep.
put in an envelope, would you open that envelope and want to know, or never open the envelope, and why? That's the one I liked.
Oh, I would.
The answer's
Yeah.
in the envelope.
Yes.
Would you open it
No,
or not?
I would open it in a heartbeat. Because I know that ignorance is bliss, but I always prefer to know because I'm more attuned with the way that the dilated peoples used to say, "I'm a glutton for the truth, even though truth hurts."
Okay.
And and the other part of it is what it will remind me of is whenever I don't have parameters around stuff, I forget how precious life is, right? When or just I mean something even basic like when sometimes when I have like no like when I have a occasionally like once every month a day without meetings, I forget like that time is precious and I need to and
Okay.
my existence here is precious, and that's going to be the ultimate reminder that life is precious for the precise reason that it is finite, you don't have all the time in the world here. That reminder to spend that time with your son, to go out and to be there and to be present in these spaces, because when I lose sight of that, and it's easy to do in the hubbub of everyday society, it's really easy to it's really easy to get lost uh, in that, and then as a result, you lose sight of why life is important, life is precious, and exactly for that reason, that's a scarce commodity.
Yeah, I was like, yes, I love this dialogue because I was like, no, but I would set up my wife and let her know, and then let her worry about when I'm going to die. Mom was like,
Oh,
that's not even
jeez.
fair. She's like, that's not even fair. I was like, all right, I'll let you stress over me. Here you go,
Oh,
you can
oh,
read
shoot.
it. Because she's like, I do that all the time. I live carefree, and she's like, you let me do all the worrying, so,
Uh-huh,
so she can
uh-huh,
read my
uh-huh.
envelope. Like, you got next week. That's it. I'm like, okay. Like,
There you go.
all
There
right,
you
what's
go.
your question for me?
All right. If you could choose, uh, let's see, if you could choose two MCs of all time, and that's the only people you could ever listen to,
Oh, okay.
who would be on your list?
Oh man, just okay.
Just two. Just
Can
two.
I say that this is me doing caveat? Is this the only two people I can? Is this the only two people I can listen to that genre of music or
No, no,
all
no, no, no,
music?
no, no. This is like just two. You got two MCs on your playlist. That's it. You're on a desert island, and
Only
you
two
have an
song.
old you have
That's my
you have an
whole
old.
library. And I mean, because I was about to say, because I like other genres than just rap with MCs.
Oh,
But
I
then,
get you.
so I would lose all that music too. I'm like,
Exactly.
dang.
All that said, I'm just
Oh
my
man.
son
All
and I
right.
have been on a hip hop kick lately, so
Yeah, me
we're
too.
just
My
yeah,
son has too as well.
yeah.
Kendrick Lamar, I think
Okay.
I can listen to his discography over and over and over and
Okay.
over. I've still sometimes randomly just play like the first what's that other one? Good Kid, Mad
Good
City.
Mad City. Yeah.
I let that. I listened to the Pimp a Butterfly. So I think I can listen to his. I can listen to his discography in different variations over and over again, right?
Okay.
And not get bored. I'll just keep on chaining songs. And J Cole.
Oh, interesting. Okay, and why?
I don't know. I'm just a J Cole stan. I think I matched with him. He's the same age as me. His birthday is one day before me. I just I like that he was a. I like that not all like he's just a normal guy, like a normal
Yeah.
person. You know, he still rides a bicycle around, and he's just like he's just a normal person. Like you don't even know he's
Yeah.
rich. You know, like he just be like
He-
normal, and like not all his songs are about like sometimes it's about normal stuff. So and
yeah.
I can listen to his songs. I actually prefer like listen to his old mixtape stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but I think just the duality of those two different artists, right? Like sometimes
That's cool.
I want to be very conscious and know my spirit and listen to Kendrick. And
Yeah.
sometimes I
Yeah.
just want to listen to stuff about relatability stuff. And
Yes, I
I wish
get
you
you.
would have gave me three, because then I would have picked like just some random toxic rapper like Future, just so I can have. No, I'm serious. So I could just have mindless, like rap that's not like for the, not
I get you.
uplifting, just
Yeah.
trap
Yeah.
music. I need that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll be whipping my minivan, talking like I'm a gangster, and I'm like picking up my kids in a minivan. Like I'm like, like I had nothing to do with the streets, but I'm rocking this minivan. Like, so that would be my three would be my third
Ah,
person would be no, my third person would be someone toxic and not toxic. You know what I mean? Like not
I know
uplifting
what you
at
mean.
all.
Yeah, I
Not
get you.
uplifting, but those two would be staples. I'd have to have those two.
Understood.
I
Understood.
would hope that they would make new music, because if they're the
Mhm.
only people, I'm like, can you at least make some new music so I can listen to your music? Uh, that'd be cool too.
There you
That's a good
go.
question. Now I'm about to be on my kick. I think about actual when they do they do that Apple Music thing at the end of the year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely Kendrick Lamar leads as my most listened artist of the year
Mhm.
every year, because I just play
Yeah.
his songs mindlessly. All
Yeah.
right, this is a great part. So this part of the show is called shout outs and plugs. You get to
Hmm.
show love to anyone you want to show love to, and then plugs. These are things that you're working on, ways to connect with you, books,
Okay.
whatever. I'll make sure to put those in the show notes for those that
Okay.
listen to follow up you. So the stage is yours. Shout outs and plugs.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So some shout outs. The first one is I'm so beyond proud of one of my academic homegirls, Oyan Poon. She wrote this book called Asian American is Not a Color. And so she really took umbrage with that how um, uh, the affirmative action debate was framed very effectively in the public discourse as Asian Americans do not like affirmative action. And there's all these different areas around race that get brought up, but it's also written in this way. It's basically these letters to her daughter, and so she and I came up in grad school together, and seeing her blowing up like this is just I'm over the rainbow proud of her, and she's still just she's just my girl Oyan, and I really really appreciate that. And then early shout out to the homie Jeff Chang, who's got just a game changer of a biography about Bruce Lee going to be dropping this fall.
Oh, snap.
It's going to be, but again, it's the racialization of Asian Americans, and I'm kind of on that kick right now, not because I'm not concerned about the racialization of Black and Brown folk, but that in the contemporary times, our narratives, when race does come up, tend to dominate the sphere. And unfortunately, it leads to some inappropriate interpretations that Asian Americans are like almost white. They're not quite, they're
I
honorarily,
mean, there's a whole term for it, minority and all
model
that, right?
minority myth. Exactly.
Yeah.
And this really does set a different tone for it. So in terms of those shout outs, I really appreciate that. And then I'd also say um, sort of collective shout out to uh, uh, the union organizers here at the University of Arizona and throughout the state of Arizona, because we're a right to work state, and these cats are still organizing and still flexing political power both on a state level as well as institutionally. Even though we're not supposed to have, even though their core leverage of collective bargaining is taken away, they're still out there grinding all the time. And I've got to just give a mad shout out to them, because it's this thankless work, but in many respects, the way that we've been able to push and leverage for increased raises, especially for the folks that run the university. I mean, I'm talking like the staff and the admins and everything like that. Those are the ones who are really benefiting in this process, as well as students. So those would be my big shout outs. And then plugs. So obviously I've got two books out right now, and yes, that sounds really arrogant, but just bear with me. So I've got Whiteness in the Ivory Tower, which is the sort of my theorizing around whiteness and how it's embedded in higher education, but then asking the question, what would higher ed look like if we divorced from the logics of whiteness? And that's a core one, because I don't like it when critical theory just breaks down, but doesn't try to actually build in its place. And that was also something. This is sort of a posthumous shout out. A dear academic homie here, Dr. Roberto Cintlio Rodriguez, always challenged us in his work and in his activism to do creation resistance. It's not just enough to say no, but we have to build something in its place. And that
Like
was
agency. Once again,
exactly.
agency. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is well before Naomi Klein was saying no is not enough. This was just our ethos in the early 2000s. And so then from that, there was as I alluded to earlier, there was a highly successful Mexican American Studies program in the Tucson Unified School District. It was actually, at the time when it was eliminated, it was the most comprehensive and effective ethnic studies K-12 program in the entire country. And before the folks now are banning critical race theory, they were banning Mexican American Studies. And so I had a book called Banned, through Cambridge University Press, that documents both the blueprint of banning that we're experiencing now, and also the alternative blueprint that we created, which is the one of resistance, both on a grassroots as well as a legal struggle, to effectively challenge these attacks and the censorship that we're experiencing in contemporary times. And sort of a spoiler alert: pre-compliance doesn't work. It only emboldens the bullies to keep their attacks going. And so those are the two books that I have out. And then from that, the book project that I'm working on right now is me being a smart aleck, but it's a deep meditation on this concept that I have called white immunity. So instead of white privilege elevating white people, it identifies a social inoculation that they have in terms of the adverse effects of white supremacy. And so that book I'm just working on right now. I'm about a third the way through it, and I'm calling it "Oh, the Caucasity."
Okay. I think that's like one of the things I think about from this episode is see something, say something, but now we need
Yeah,
to add do something.
that's right. That's right.
I think we need to add that to the layer. Like see something, say something about it, but do something about it. Add
There you
that to the
go.
layer. So
I
hopefully
appreciate
if
that.
you feel empowered, find out that you still have agency within yourself to do whatever you can. If you feel powerless and within the systems that we live in, you still have agency within your home or agency within your neighborhood to still make a difference. So hopefully this conversation empowers you for that. Additionally, Positive Filter listeners, every episode is dedicated to late memory of my father-in-law, Jeff Kirsch, and all the work he did fighting food insecurity around the United States. So please consider supporting the Jeff Kirsch Anti-Hunger Fund. And additionally, as a proponent of kindness, please, if you work at George Mason, consider submitting a Paths for Patriots to increase kindness around this university, because that can also make a difference. So thank you so much for listening. Please check in with Dr. Cabrera and all the things he's doing. And thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to Positive Filter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity of Movement. Thanks for listening.